Good afternoon, my YouTube viewers. Palestine here. Welcome to my channel. I've had a very stressful few days and had a very stressful morning. So I've had stress with my personal relationships, and then also I've had stress and how I make my money as well. And so basically what I wanted to talk about in this video is training. So I joined the United States Air Force in 1979, and what I wanted to do is I wanted to compare the training that I received in the Air Force with the training that I received in Civvie Street. So basically, I got my first job as a teenager working in fast food, and so they would teach you the basics, teach you how to operate a till, teach you how to take somebody's order or get their food and charge them money. And it was all done by human beings. Well, today it's not done by human beings. My very first job was at McDonald's, and so it was all done by human beings. Humans did it all. It's not done like that anymore. Now it's computerized. So if you go into the McDonald's today, you'll be confronted with computers or big touch screens. And then on the touch screen, you will order what you want, and then you will pay for your meal that you've ordered, either with cash or with a debit card. And then you will get a receipt, and then you will take the receipt to the counter, and they will prepare your meal for you. And so it's the way McDonald's operates today is completely different from the way McDonald's operated in the 1970s when I was working there. And so basically, when you were working at McDonald's as a teenager, you got just enough training that you needed to get in order to do the job. And then when I was 18, I joined the military because basically I was having a bad day. Some guy wasn't nice to me, so I decided to join the military, which isn't a good reason to join the military. And then so when we were in the military, the first thing, when I joined the Air Force, the United States Air Force, the first thing that happened was you went through basic training. And I went through basic training at Lackland Air Force Base. And then after I went to basic training, then I was sent to Keesler Air Force Base, where I went through a 6 weeks basic electronic course. And then when I completed my 6 weeks basic electronics course, then I got training to be a radio relay equipment repairman. But eventually, over the years, they didn't call it radio relay anymore. They called it wideband. And so basically, whenever you went to a new assignment, when I went to radio relay, when I did my radio relay training, they did your training that you were going to learn at any base. And then, but like if you were going to go to a base that had specialized equipment, then you would go to training for specialized equipment, such as when I was in Germany, I was working on the Track 97. And so when I was working on the Track 97, I actually went to technical school to actually learn the Track 97. And then when I was in the Netherlands, I was working on, NATO equipment, which was different from American equipment because American equipment has different frequencies, different voltages, different bandwidths from your NATO equipment. But we did actually go to training for that as well. And in addition to the in-house training that I received and my peers received, we also had skill levels. So you had a skill 3 level. So when you went to your first base and you completed your technical school, you were a 3 level. And then you had to go through 5 level training. And basically what you had to do in that regard is you were given books that you had to study. And then in addition to that, somehow or other they gave you a 5 level. I don't know if I think maybe your manager had to approve your training for you to get the 5 level. And then after the 5 level, you had to do more training to get your 7 level. And that was a certain rank. I think you had to be a staff sergeant or a tech sergeant to be a 7 level. And then you had to go through more training to be a 9 level. And you had to be like a master sergeant to be a 9 level. So you had to take these correspondence courses to increase in your skill level for your job. And so in addition to that, you also had to learn about the military. So you had professional military education, PME. So what you would do is if you wanted to progress through the ranks, you would have to get a book called a PME book, and you would have to actually study that book, and you would have to study the book to get promoted to staff sergeant, to get promoted to technical sergeant, to get promoted to master sergeant, etc., etc. And then you would have to take a test, and I think it was every 6 months or every year, you would have to go in to a building and take a test. And then if you passed the test and your appraisals were okay, then you got promoted. So you had to stay skilled in your job, and you had to stay skilled in the military. And then in addition to that, you would have on-the-job training. And with your on-the-job training, you would have training records. And with your training records, depending upon your skill level, or where you were based, your skill level and where you were based, you would have to go through the training records and make sure that you were proficient on all of the items in your training records. So in the military, I did, and my colleagues, my peers, did a lot of training, because you went to training schools, you went to schools, technical schools, and then you had to take correspondence courses to advance in your skill level, and then you had training records and you had training. And so that's one of the things that you had to do in the military. So in the military, people were always training. So I got out of the military, and I don't think it was the right thing for me to do. I probably should have stayed in the military, but I wanted to get married, and it was a hard job, and I wanted to get married. And anyway, so I got out of the military, and I didn't get to retire because I wanted to get married, which was, in hindsight, was a mistake. I should have stayed in. But I got out, and then I had to go to work, and my ex-husband forced me to go to work. He told me I had to get a job. So because I was a woman, they just thought that the only thing that I was good for was being a secretary. And so I went and registered at the temp agencies, and so I would get these secretarial positions or typist positions and things like that. And I did my best, so I knew how to type, because I took typing in high school, and I typed all my papers and things. So I would get a job in a typing pool, which I didn't last very long in that. And then I would get a job as a secretary. But I really didn't like secretarial work. And the thing is when you go into these type of jobs, which are sort of like entry-level positions, you don't really get any training. They just tell you to do it. And if they don't give you any training, they just tell you to do it. And then if you do it wrong, they give it back to you and tell you to do it again. And then, like, let's say you want to go and get some training, like you want to go to college to, like, learn business studies or something like that. Well, you have to pay for that yourself. You have to get your own training in your own time. But a long time ago, because I have a friend, I think she went and got a B-Tech or something like that, and I don't think they even do that anymore. But when she finished school, when she was 16, then she went and got a job, and she would do a day release. So she finished school when she was 16, she got a job, and then one day a week, she would go to college. And when she finished, she got a B-Tech out of that. And B-Tech stands for something. So a long time ago, people were actually going to day release. I've never heard of anybody going to any day release now. I think they've done away with that. And then, so basically, you have to get basically, you have to get your own training. So you leave school at 16, you can do a couple of A-levels, or you might want to go to a B-Tech, like a College of Technology, and you might want to study business studies, but you have to do it all yourself. Your employer is not going to train you to do it. They expect you to already know it. And so you might be able to get a job as an office junior, which I don't think they even have office juniors anymore. So you might be able to get a job as an office junior when you're 16. I've never heard of any other office junior jobs, because now with the advent of AI, many of these entry-level positions don't exist anymore, because they're using AI to do these entry-level positions. And then if you looked at my video that I made yesterday, you can't really trust AI that much. Even if you're using AI, you have to go back and check it, because sometimes it makes mistakes, which in my video I made yesterday, I was talking about the mistakes that this co-pilot made when I gave it a spreadsheet of data and asked it to calculate some things, and it didn't calculate it correctly. And I have written, for what I'm doing now, I've written programs in VBA, because Excel, you can write programs in VBA and Excel that automates a lot of tasks, because I can't possibly do the work that I need to do manually in the 14 hours a week. So I have to write programs in VBA to do it. But I still check my work. I still check my work, even though VBA does everything. And so I wrote a program to where I enter some data manually every month. And then I wrote a program where you have to enter the row that you want to check, then the rows that you want to check. And then when you enter the rows that you want to check, then what the program will do is it will compute all this information and put it on the screen for me. And so even when the information is on the screen written in VBA, I still check it. I still have to check it, And so because this information is used in reports and things like that. So even though VBA, which is a form of AI, does it, I still have to check the work. And that's what a lot of these jobs now, a lot of the entry-level jobs now are. You do something with AI, but you have to go back and check it and make sure that AI did it correctly. But you don't get training in Civvie Street. If you want training, you have to go to college and you have to get training in your own time. So I did an apprenticeship in accounting, which I talked about in my last video. I had to do that in my own time. I had to pay for it myself, and I had to do all the coursework myself. I had to do everything in my own time, because businesses are just not going to pay you. Not unless it's something that they're really desperate in. Because one time I applied to do a PGCE, that's a postgraduate certificate in education, for which I didn't get any support from my Scottish boyfriend. He didn't support me. And so I applied for it, and then I had to ask people to recommend me for the job. And then I went to an assessment day, and so I didn't get the job. But again, because they had a shortage of teachers in certain specialties, so you had to be willing to be a teacher in a certain specialty, and then you would get a bursary. I think it was a bursary for it. But the only time businesses are going to train you is if it's something that they have a shortage of. And if they have a shortage of something, then they will train you. And if there is no shortage, you have to pay for your own training, and you have to do it in your own time. I mean, the whole time I've been working in the UK, which is over 30 years, like 32 years, about somewhere in that area, they sent me on one course, and it was a minute-taking course. And then there are some courses like government agencies, some government agencies where, like a medical field, where they will give you training on how to be a healthcare assistant, or they will give you training on how to be a nurse. And some people will get training. They'll be able to do NVQs, National Vocational Qualifications. But it's only if they need people. The only way that you're ever going to get any training from any business or any government organization is if they have a shortage. And so that was one of the things that I was really surprised about, because when I was in the military, it was all about training. And in Civvie Street, the focus isn't on training. They just give it to you to do, and if you don't do it right, they tell you to do it again. If you're really lucky, you can get a mentor, but I've never really been that lucky. I've just been given something to do, and if I didn't do it right, I was told to do it again, which I don't think is a very efficient way to train people personally. And so I have problems, like a lot of the things that I do, which I've studied data science on my own, studied Python on my own, I've studied R on my own, I've studied Excel on my own, and I'm getting ready to study some more Excel topics so I can improve my skill level, because if anything happens and I need to get another job, then I'm going to try to get something working online, because my health is not good enough for me to travel. But all of this training that I've gotten outside of the military, with the exception of one little bitty minute-taking course, I've got on my own. I've had to spend my own money and do my own time on it. And then some companies, you have like mandatory and statutory training. So they might tell you to do mandatory and statutory training. And that used to be in-person training, but now it's pretty much online. And that's just to comply with government requirements. So if you're working in a financial industry, you might have to do an online course on money laundering, which might take an hour. And you might have to take a course on data protection. And so that is just to comply with statutory requirements. It's because they have to give you training on that. They have to, if you're working in a financial type organization, you have to take a course on money laundering. But it's not going to be a long course. It'll be like an hour. And you have to take a course, any company you go to, if you're dealing with data, you have to take a course on data protection. And so there are some courses that some companies where you have to do your statutory and mandatory training. So when I was working in Foster Wheeler, for which they harassed me out of the job, I had to do like some mandatory training, but it was online. And when I was working at Barclays Mercantile, I had to do training. I don't remember how I did the training, but I'm sure I had to do some training because it was a financial institution. But if you're working, depending upon where you're working, you're going to have to do some mandatory training, but it's going to be the absolute minimum training that they have to give you, because they're not paying you to get trained. They're paying you to do a job. So that's the difference between training in the military, which it was all about training, and you got to do your training on the job, and training in Civvie Street. Civvie Street, you have to do your own training. You have to pay for your own education. The only way that you're ever going to get a company to pay for your training is if it's something they have a shortage of. And if they have a shortage of something, like I wanted to do this PGCE for the Open University, well, it was going to be funded by the government because they had a shortage of teachers. But that's the only way you're ever going to get any company to pay for your training, is if they have a shortage of that skill. And so that's what I wanted to talk about in this video. I've got lots of other topics that I could discuss, that I need to discuss, and I will discuss at some point. But obviously I'm really under a lot of stress now. I've had some relationship pressures which have caused me a lot of stress, and I have work pressures too. I have a lot of stress professionally, even though I'm in a really low position. I'm in an entry-level position. I get a lot of stress in that job too. So thank you so much for watching my video. If you like my video, please like and subscribe. And thank you for taking an interest in my insights, what I have to say and what I think, and my experiences.